Good evening, everybody. It's really nice to be here. I've been traveling from Belgium today to come here, and that's maybe also what I wanted to start with. As you can see here on the slides, you can see my name, you know who I am, and I'm working at the Faculty of Architecture in Hasselt University in Belgium. I want to start with this, because we are now in Lithuania and everybody knows where that is, but I was wondering if everybody here was knowing where Belgium exactly is, because we have a very small country, but at the same time it's a very difficult country in the sense that we have a north part where people speak Dutch, and we have a south part where people speak French. So it's a very small country, you see it here, but from a cultural point of view, a language point of view, a political point of view, it's complicated. And that is what I wanted to start with. Lots of the universities with whom I collaborate, my home base is really on the right-hand side, close to the Dutch border. Hasselt University is really in the province of Limburg. So you could say we speak Dutch, but in terms of history, we share a lot of cultural, political feelings, senses of belonging with people in the Netherlands, one could say. So lots of our research projects are in the Flemish part, the north part of Belgium, where we speak Dutch. As I will explain later, I'm also doing research projects with colleagues in Liège, the Walloon part of Belgium, where we speak French. And that's interesting because not only the cultural context is a bit different, but also the housing conditions of people. The density is different in Wallonia versus Flanders. So that was just a small thing to start with. If you look at the population of people who are growing older in Belgium, you see here numbers rising, and I think that's the same almost everywhere in European countries. We know that the population is graying, and also the oldest people are getting older because of lots of very good things. Healthcare is better than it was decades ago, and so on. So people are getting older, and the oldest people are also getting older. But that gives challenges for the housing sector. What we see in Belgium is that due to many different circumstances, and I will come back to that later, we have a lot of under-occupied homes, meaning that older people often live in homes that are surrounded by a garden. I will show some pictures later, but that due to the course of life, once the time that you construct a home, you get children often, you house the home with a family, but at a particular moment in time, children grow older, they leave, and you still are in your house that maybe has 4 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. It's way too big, but people love their homes. So what we also have in Belgium is a lot of under-occupied homes. Houses that are too big for the people who still live there. So that as a small introduction, this is what I want to talk to you about tonight. First of all, I want to show you where do older people live in Belgium, in Flanders more in particular, because that's where we are doing most of our research. I want to tell you about our research on housing older people and the link to subjective well-being. I also am explaining and focusing on the taxonomy, an overview of housing concepts that we developed in the House Research Project. And we have not only been developing that, we have also been talking to lots of older people who currently live in housing facilities that we have listed in the taxonomy. And we also have been talking to lots of architects. What were their experiences in constructing those housing concepts? Did they experience any thresholds? So that is also what I want to share with you. And I'll conclude with some take-home messages. So first question, where do older people in Belgium and Flanders live? And this is also always a question that I ask when I have to teach students or when I do a lecture for an audience. I don't know exactly how it is in Lithuania, but if I ask this question, how high is the percentage of older people whereby we define older people as people who are 65 and older, because 65 was the official retirement age until recently in my home country. How many people do you think are living in a residential care facility? This could be, the question is Flanders, but it's also interesting to hear your thoughts about Lithuania. 10%, okay. 20? Meer? 5. It's 5. Very good guess. Yeah, 2 weeks ago I had the opportunity to do a lecture for people who are in the profit sector, realizing care facilities and profit housing concepts. They build things, they sell them for a lot of money, and then people go there and live there. They thought it was way higher. They thought about 20%. But it is only 5%, while in the minds of many people, it's a lot. It's much more than 5%. So when we know from the numbers that it is 5%, and in addition, we have this figure showing that the population of 65 and older in residential care, if you put it on a slide and go back to 2010, we see that the number is relatively stable over time. It doesn't increase. So the second thing that we then analyzed, is there a difference between males and females maybe? Because we know from sociological research that there is a difference in life expectancy, sometimes males, females. Then this was what we saw if we did a specific analysis and looked specifically at gender and age. We saw that indeed the oldest people are, if you look at the population of a residential care facility, the oldest old persons are females, which is a bit what we expected. But it is the oldest old persons who go to live in a residential care facility. So people consider it really as the last resort when care at home is no longer possible. So, but if we know that it is 5%, that means that 95% of all the older persons, and also the oldest old people, live in our neighborhoods, in our streets, in the villages and cities where we also live. And that is really important, because that makes the number really very clear, and also the challenges, because people think it's way more and old people live somewhere. They are neglected sometimes, but it's 95% who live at home in Belgium. So 95% older people live independently at home. Why is that the case? Maybe everybody here has heard about aging in place. In Belgium, living for as long as possible in your home is a policy ideal. It's a thing, that policy, that government stresses, that is important. And it is also written down in many policy documents. Because when we think about housing, and if we consider or think about changing something, policy is a thing, because policy regulates what's possible. So if it is noted in many policy documents that housing and staying for as long as possible in your house is important, that's already a key thing to take into account. For instance, you see a citation here. So it's a policy thing in many European countries and also in Flanders, because I already pointed to the complicated political situation in my home country. Housing is a thing for which not the federal level is responsible in Belgium, but the regional level, which is Flanders. For more details, we can talk when we have the reception. It's complicated, but we have a regional government who's responsible for housing. So also in their policy documents, they mention that this is really what people want. People want to live at home for as long as possible. At the same time, it's also true. Older people themselves are motivated to stay at home, to live there for as long as possible, and they only consider moving when care at home doesn't suffer anymore, when it can be when they can't be taken care of, when the care need is too high. So indeed, there is a policy ideal. At the same time, it's also the wish, the personal preference of many people. You see here some pictures of things that people can sometimes put in their homes as kind of decorative item. Those are some slogans in Dutch, one could say, but they spread the word that it's really good to have your own home. It's good to live at home in your, and yeah, that's the place where you feel well. It's a wish of many older people also when you rationalize your home, when you think about your home, when you know that it's not adapted, that there are a lot of stairs, that you have a lot of things that maybe don't work anymore or that aren't good, that the quality isn't good, people still say, I want to stay here. This is my home. This is also an important number. I don't know the numbers in Lithuania, but in Belgium, owning a house is also something that is really important. It has been stimulated also by the government in the past, that it was very important that you don't rent a place, but you try to get to be an owner, that you own your place, you buy it, and you pay a loan for 20 years, 30 years. And in the end, you are the owner of your house. So today, amongst the older persons in Belgium, 7 out of 10 people, and it's even a bit more than 70%, own their dwelling. We are often said to be born with a brick in our stomach. We like to live in our own home for as long as possible. And that also gives a kind of explanation for the emotional attachment that people have to their home place. So it has been stimulated by policy, as you can see here. It also has been considered as an important aspect on the social ladder. I'm an owner of a house. That says something about you. While people who were still renting, yeah, then people would say, when are you going to buy a house? It's important that you are the owner of something, that you need to strive to own something. So owning a dwelling in our country has been stimulated and also feels like it gives you financial security, gives you safety, it gives you a saving for later in life. When I would ask my grandparents 10 years ago, and they would still be alive, they would say, the house is for my children. When I die someday, the house is for my family. Then maybe somebody of the grandchildren can come and live here. Or you can sell the house and then you have some money to be shared among you. It's my thing, it's my savings for you. But what we also see in Belgium is that the group of older renters is growing. We need to be very attentive for that group. And there are also people, and that group is also growing, who own a house, but who pay a lot to take care of that house and who don't have anything left to live. So they have a house, they are house rich, but income poor and life quality poor. So due to all those things, Belgium has a rather static housing system, which means that not that many people are prone to move. There is not a huge willingness, a degree of willingness to move. And we also know from the numbers and from research how older people get, the less prone one is to move. And people prefer to not move, but it isn't always a story of I don't want to. There are other factors also that play a role. Many people don't like the practical stuff. When you need to move, there's a lot of practical things that need to be done. You need to pack lots of things, throw away things. You need to go somewhere to get rid of all those stuff. You need to unpack it elsewhere. There is a lot of administration to be done. And the older people they don't see why they need to put effort in that. They don't like to do that anymore. Also, what we have learned over the years is that many people, also older people, are not enough up to date on the diversity of housing options that's possible. Or that people say, this is my house, I don't want to stay in my house, but I want to stay in my neighborhood. And that's also the link to the lecture series, Nature. What makes you feel good in a neighborhood, in a place that is close to your heart? If the other housing options are not present in the neighborhood, people are also not that willing to move sometimes. And we also know that deciding to move takes time. It's a process that costs mentally, financially, and it takes time. And again, the older people get, the less prone they are to do that, to invest time they have in these kinds of decisions. So that's a bit of situation sketch, context sketch, to introduce you to research on housing, older people and well-being that we are doing. Over the years, I've been guiding different PhD students who investigate topics related to housing, aging in place, and older people. And we always link that to subjective well-being. We often do qualitative research. Most often we do qualitative research, meaning that we go to lots of houses in Flanders, Brussels, cities, but also very small communities, and not in cities, but in rural communities far off the grid, maybe even sometimes small villages where there are no shops, nothing, and that people are a bit not a bit, they are car dependent, they are dependent on other people to go to stores. And then I just collected some pictures of what we saw, how people are developing coping mechanisms. Here we have a lady in a kitchen, and you see a chair, you see also a printer in the kitchen, so multifunctional things. You see how the kitchen is doing other things too than it's only being used for cooking. This is a picture that we also saw often. When you grow older, it's interesting that your bed is higher. I'm 45, and I have to say that sometimes I was just telling to Evelina, my knee is hurting since the weekend. I don't know what I did, but my knee is hurting. And sometimes it's nice to have a bed that's a bit higher, that you can easily go in and out the bed. The same goes for cars. So what we often saw is that people look for ways themselves to hide in a bed, because they don't always have the money to buy a new bed that they like. So this lady said, my son placed bricks, and now my bed is way better. There is a brick on the four sides of the bed, and it's better. And we saw this a lot. This was also an interesting picture. It's a picture from Walloon housing situation. This is a typical architectural style we often see in the south part of the country. This was a specific type of bricks. Here was a man living alone in a house that was way too big for him, and you see the stairs. This man had a physical problem with the legs, so he couldn't walk very good, but he was very decisive and said, I'm not leaving my house. This is my family residence. I've raised my children here. I've lived a happy life with my wife here. And you see the mailbox on the bottom of the picture. And his daily achievement was, that was very important to him, to leave the house. He also didn't want anything on the stairs. His daily achievement was to go out, take the stairs, go to the mailbox where his newsletter would be delivered every day, and then go back again. He said, that is my daily exercise. I know, and everybody's saying, get rid of the stairs, place a ramp, do something different with it, or go to a small flat, the house is too big. But this made him really proud, and he said, that is my thing, that's my mastery. I still am master of my environment, I can do this. How difficult it gets, I'm still doing it. And this is also a topic that we often have been investigating, not only houses of rich people, one could say, but also of vulnerable people. This is a photo, maybe it's not recognizable enough, it's an image of a house in a social housing neighborhood. So we also take the diversity of older people into account. And for instance, in Belgium and in the province where I live, we have a rich mining history. We had mines who in the 1950s attracted lots of people from other countries to work in the mines. So we have a huge population of people with an Italian background, a Polish background, Moroccan and Turkish people, who still are living in those neighborhoods, and there is very few research being done that takes the diversity of their wishes, needs, concerns into account. So one of my PhD students really took that topic into, was very close to her heart, and that is what she did, investigating the needs, wishes of all the people with a migration background. So the project that I want to talk to you about tonight is the biggest research project that we are doing currently on housing Aging in Place, Older People and Subjective Well-being, and it's called the House Research Project. Taking into account all considerations that I've been talking to you about, the House Project investigates housing concepts, innovative housing concepts for future and current older people that positively impact people's subjective well-being. I have been talking about aging in place, but we are convinced that aging in place is not enough. The aim should be aiming well, aging well in the right place. You have to feel happy, ideally, in the place where you grow old. In literature, there is a distinction people sometimes make between objective and subjective well-being. When I teach the students, I can talk about an hour only about that, but I'm not going to do that tonight. It's a bit more practical here. And a bit more an overview of what we are doing. But there is a discussion, a huge discussion in literature, what is the definition of well-being? If we translate that into an architectural way, we often state that, okay, objective well-being has to do with parameters, elements that we can objectively assess. If you look at the room here, somebody can measure the temperature in this room. Maybe it's 21 degrees or 22 degrees, I don't know. But then there is a thing. For me, it could be perfectly fine, but maybe somebody says, oh no, it's way too cold here, or it's way too warm here. So there is always the objective, accessible thing that we can measure, and then the subjective evaluation of parameters. For instance, is there a set of stairs? If you remember the picture of the old guy with the stairs, yes. From an objective point of view, his children also said, this is not good for you, you can fall. If you fall, you need to go to a hospital, and so on. But the subjective well-being, do I feel happy here? Does it make me happy? And in this case, the man with the stairs said, this is my mastery. I'm still the master of my environment. And we will see that's really, really important. So we talk about subjective well-being often in our research projects. And what we also know and have seen is that not only the bricks in the house are important, but also the neighborhood, the immediate neighborhood surrounding the house where somebody lives. We started this project in December 21, you see the link, and it's an interdisciplinary project. That's really important. The Faculty of Architecture is the head of the project, but we do it together with social researchers, people who have a lot of knowledge in gerontology. And we also collaborate with an IT training program, because key to the funding program where we got our funding to do this research project is that we not only develop fundamental research, we do PhD research, but we also translate our insights into a way that practice can learn something from it, that architects can do something with it, that building contractors are inspired, that we give them inspiration based on scientific insights. If we talk about housing and well-being and older people in Flanders, I told you about the complexity of our country before. There are lots of actors involved. If you want to change something about housing and well-being, we need policy people. You see lots of names on top of the slide, macro-level stakeholders, but we also need architects, evidently. We need care organizations, housing organizations, and we also need people close to our target groups themselves. We need older people, but also people who help them make decisions. So we have around 30 partners in our project who support us and for whom we are making things that hopefully can inspire them. In our house project, we have 4 work packages and 4 objectives. You can see them here. But today I want to talk to you about the 3rd work package. So in the project we have 4 researchers who are doing a PhD on these topics. And at the same time we also develop tools like an evaluation instrument that can support people to take decisions on housing. And that's why we also developed a taxonomy, an overview of housing concepts that can inspire architects and people in Belgium. So our taxonomy. Important changes that we noticed when we initiated this project is the graying of the population. That's already very important. And you maybe noticed that I talked about current older people, whom we defined as 65 and older. It shifts. Some literature says it's 67 in the meantime, because the pension, the official age to retire also has changed in the meantime in Belgium. On the contrary, we also see in academic literature that there are a lot of people, researchers worldwide, who say it's 60. You need to talk about an older person as of 60. But nevertheless, we say, okay, 60, 65. But we also take into account future older people. And there we said, okay, let's talk about, everybody will hopefully get older. If you are 45 and older, in our project, we consider you to be a future older person. So I am part of the target group myself, but I hope everybody will be part of the target group one day. And we do that because we think it is important to think early enough about how you want to live when you grow older. A second thing that gets a lot of attention in my country is that we see that loneliness is an issue. Loneliness among people, but certainly also among older people, really is becoming a very hot topic in Belgium too. So that is also a thing that we said it's important to take that into account. At the same time, a growing heterogeneity, diversity within older people. I said it before, health conditions are better than it was decades ago, so life expectancy is rising. We have had migration trends, such as many other European countries too. So the population of older people is more diverse. But at the same time, there are also demographical changes that are happening. People decide, for instance, to divorce way more than they would do 1-2 decades ago. So the family structures are changing also. And all that impacts on who older people are and where they are going. And currently in the housing market, those issues are not countered, at least not in my country. So there is a growing diversity. And that diversity, that growing heterogeneity is insufficiently translated into the Belgian building sector. It's unadapted. We know that the percentage of unadapted dwellings in my country is really high. We also see that the older person is taken as a benchmark, but there is not such a thing as the older person. Everybody is different, and that makes it really hard to answer the question how to design housing for people. Policy seems to apply a one-size-fits-all approach, but sometimes it's one-size-fits-nobody, because everybody is different. And we think it's important to focus not only on current older people, but also on future older people, as I just said. Current housing possibilities have too much of a one-size-fits-all approach, and there is really a need in Belgium for more diverse housing options for older people. If we then were looking what kind of housing options exist between the individual dwelling on the one side, the prototypical thing that many Belgians have been aspiring to have, to own, and the residential care facility. The place where you go, in people's minds, when you grow older, when you cannot live at home anymore, where people take care of you, and you are no master of your life anymore. Somebody else decides when you get up, what you eat, and so on, when you go to bed. What exists in between? That is when we came up with a taxonomy of housing concepts. There are different overviews that exist in academic literature, but this is what we have been working on in the House project till now, where we take into account spatial sharing, but also social sharing. That's difficult to pronounce. Spatial sharing, you see it on top. The options on the left hand of the image, they don't share. But the more you go to the right, the more you share. And if you look at the figure from top to bottom, from the social perspective, I don't share towards I share a lot. I'm open to sharing a lot. If you look at the individual dwelling, what we typically know of in Belgium, the single family house on top there, you don't share. There is nobody else than you, your own family in that house, and you are the owner of all living spaces. The more you go to the right, the more spaces you share. The more you go to the bottom, the more you are open to social sharing, to sharing spaces with other people also. In the presentation, I'm now explaining some housing options. I don't have time to explain everything. That's why I also mentioned the house website, because there is een handleiding. That's an interesting word in Dutch, how to translate that. There is a document that explains all the housing types and gives examples. So that's also interesting to share and maybe to consult afterwards. So let's look at the examples, because it makes it more concrete. And this is a slide with Dutch titles from newspapers. You don't have to understand it. It was just to illustrate that we see all the more that the topic is really alive in Belgium. There's a lot of attention for co-housing. Loneliness is an issue, not only in daily press, but also in television shows, radio stations, and so on. This was just a small screenshot of things that we found a few months ago. It's alive. So, okay, a small example. Maybe also a reminder, if there are Belgian people in the audience or Flemish people, sometimes we have very specific names for housing types, like kangaroo living. I will explain it in a minute. I just translated kangaroo wonen. Some terms are an invention, probably not the official terminology. We are working on the concept because sometimes they don't exist in other countries. I will also show examples that exist in other countries, but not in Belgium, but it can be inspiring also for Belgians. So, if you know that kangaroo living is a form of living where different generations live in the same building and they can help each other out. That's a definition. How many people, how much percentage of Belgian older people would be open to do that? So it's with family. Eh? For instance, a grandmother with the grandchildren, or a grandmother and grandfather with a child and a partner, maybe also with the children of with the grandchildren. How many people would be open to that kind of housing option, do you think? This is really recent research. More? It's 12. But I have to say, we are already very enthusiastic about this number, because 2 years ago it was 6%. So it doubled. And sometimes earlier this year, my colleague did a presentation at a conference where older people organizations were. And she asked, would you be open to share a space that you can use as a kitchen, or a place when you have family over and it's too much, you can use that space? Yes. Would you share a space where you can place the items that you need in the garden, to work in the garden? Oh yeah. Would you mind sharing a basement? Oh yeah. Many people say, oh yeah, because mine is too big. And would you mind sharing a garden? Oh yeah. Many people would say, yeah, because my garden is too big, and then if I can share it, somebody can help me. And the more she asked, the more people said, yes, I think it would be something for me, but I don't know if that exists in my city or in my community. So policy is already really positive about this number, and we as well, because it has been doubled on a very short term. A typology that we know in Belgium is zorgwonen. It's called granny flat in academic literature sometimes, or care housing, meaning that you create a small housing facility that is part of, or that is very close to, an existing dwelling. So you see different options here, and this is interesting, and it is possible since 2016. So it's not that long that it's possible, made possible by Flemish policy, that we do this. But this is a way, for instance, if my parent, one of my parents, would be in need for care and wouldn't be open to move to a residential care facility or an assistive living facility, I could do this if my family would be open to do this, for instance, and then they would be close by. So it's a small housing unit that can be integrated into an existing building or can be placed outside. So you don't need extra permissions or something to do this. Because it is a small unit, it's small size in terms of square meters, and it is really to take care of a loved one that is close to you. I also had a film, a short movie about a kangaroo living in Ireland, but I'm looking at time and I think I will continue. We will share the presentation later, and then you can also look at the examples, and again, they are also... It's 3-4 minutes, so I think... Is it okay? Okay. It's a project in Ireland, not in Belgium.
There are currently 650,000 elderly people living in Ireland. By 2040, that figure is going to rise to 1.4. That creates a number of challenges for the state. Firstly, there's the issue of pensions and healthcare funding. And secondly, the issue of providing appropriate housing. We've taken these two aspects and we've put them together.
Our proposal is to create a 3-bedroom, 2-story adaptable home, which becomes a 2-bedroom accessible apartment with a 3-bedroom family duplex above.
We've considered how this will work in the planning and design system. Planners know that those homes that they're assessing can and will be adapted. This ultimately will give certainty to the future occupants, knowing that they can adapt the home that they're purchasing now without requiring planning permission.
There are 3 principal design interventions. First is a beam at the back of the house so that the ground floor can be extended, soundproof and fireproof first floor with accessible stairs, and attic trusses in the attic space.
This is a very simple solution, thinking how the house will be used in 10, 15, 20 years' time. This concept of bringing families physically closer together. For the older person, they have a family on hand should they ever meet. For the rest of the family, they will be parent and grandparent to be part of their daily lives.
So what you see here is that the architecture also triggers social aspects. And I will come back to that later. I've talked about the neighborhood already, but it's more and more that we see interdisciplinary insights coming to the front, in architecture too. The architecture can stimulate social interaction, can stimulate people meeting each other, grandparents sometimes being closer to their family, taking care of each other. That's really interesting and important. Then some other types within our typology, co-living and co-housing. There are lots of papers on co-housing possibilities, and again, we can have an hour of discussion about the definition of co-living and co-housing. One can write a PhD research about that. In our overview, that's also based on academic literature, evidently, we say, okay, you have co-living in one column and co-housing possibilities in the other column, a column more to the right. Because in co-living, you share spaces, such as a garden, a laundry room, a workspace, but you don't share living spaces. So you share, but no living spaces. Whereas in co-housing facilities, you also share a minimum of living spaces, such as a kitchen or a seating area, a place where you, it's close to you and your daily activities. You house together with other people you are housing together. You share at least a living space. They are designed for 2 key aims, one could say. They heighten the quality of your social life. And again, what we just saw in this project in Ireland is also important in that respect. It lightens the burdens of everyday life because it also helps to increase your time off at home. You can have time to talk to other people. You can have time to do meaningful things, things that you value in life, because there are other people who are there, who are surrounding you, who are maybe helping you to counter loneliness, although you don't have to call it that way or have to experience it that way. When we look for literature on housing, senior co-housing, there are lots of examples, again, and there is a lot of discussion on the terminology, but we have noticed that there are 6 common characteristics if you look at co-housing. First, there needs to be a participatory trajectory. People who are part of a typical co-housing project have often been part of a long trajectory before the project is being realized, wherein they have really taken part in the process, have been involved in thinking about the conceptualization of the project, together with the architect, with the other future inhabitants, what functions come where, and so on. So they are often and mostly designs that really foster the sense of community. Over the years, and I will come to that later when we talk about the experiences of people with whom we have been doing interviews, people often refer to this. We do activities together, but at the same time, we have lots of talks before somebody is part of our community. We have to feel that you can become a part of our community. We need to feel that, yeah, we value the same things in life, because sometimes otherwise it can be quite difficult. There are extensive common areas where you can informally meet each other, and also the management of the housing project, you are taking a role in that too as a resident, possibly with the support of an external organization. There is a non-hierarchical structure, and people mostly have separate sources of income. This is the biggest co-housing project in the city of Ghent that we currently know in Flanders. There are 59 families who live here. They are spread over 3 co-housing groups, and it has opened 2 years ago. So it's currently the largest co-housing project that we have. And there is a lot of attention here for interaction, for what I said before, the social interaction, the fact that the architect helps to create opportunities to meet other people, to encounter other people. You see a picture of the garden here, but the way it is organized just helps to create those possibilities to meet others, which overcomes issues like loneliness, for instance. Going to this, dotted living and harmonica living, it's a housing concept that we currently don't know in Flanders yet, but it exists in the Netherlands. And it is certainly, it's gestippeld wonen in Dutch, so it's again a term that we invented for the presentation, dotted living. People live in an apartment. Different people can live in a huge apartment. Doesn't matter the size of the building, but at least they share one extra apartment. They all invest in one extra apartment that can be used by everybody, and it can have a multifunctional. It can be multifunctional. It can be a place to party. It can be a place to have somebody sleep. It can be a place to drink coffee, to read, to do a workshop, whatever. So the structure is that the different people who live in an apartment invest in one additional apartment and then share that space, and it can have multifunctional purposes. It happens in the Netherlands, and it seems rather easily to organize also in France, because you don't need an external organization. You need a good organization within the apartment building, and the bigger the group can be, the lower the cost of the people to invest in that extra place. But this is a place, it works in the Netherlands, where you can meet other people, where you can do things with different people that live in the same apartment. Harmonica housing is the same initiative, but people live on the same floor. People who live next door to each other, and then again, they can invest in a shared space. So for us, this seems very interesting also to realize, but we don't know examples in Flanders yet. This is the case that exists in Utrecht in the Netherlands. So it's a building with 70 apartments, and they rent one joint apartment that's open for sharing. In this place, there are people of different ages who live here, young people, older people, but definitely just older people who live there alone, younger people with a family. It's a really diverse group of people who live here, and the joint apartment can be used for multiple purposes and functions. So it could be realized everywhere. Coming to the spaces that people can organize to share a lot. I already talked about the residential care facility. I'm not going to do that here. I want to tell something about Hospita Dwelling. That's an organization that we know in Belgium, not in Flanders yet officially. There probably are unofficial initiatives that do this. But it exists certainly in Wallonia, in the south part of Belgium. I started the presentation by saying that we have lots of underused houses, also in bigger cities where we have lots of training programs in universities, in university colleges, and we have a growing problem of student housing accommodation. Prices are really high, and we see that that's really becoming an issue for many cities. At the same time, there are the numbers of student accommodation is rising, but it's always, it can't follow the pace of students who are in need of student accommodation. So in 2009, aiming to support older adults living in these very big houses, one initiated this en trois usages, one roof, two ages who live together, and this organization is really successful in Wallonia. So there is, for instance, an older person with a house that's too big, and then students can come and live in that house. The older person evidently still lives in the house, and sometimes there is no need, but it can be that they ask something. Evidently, students pay a rent, but the rent can be lowered if you take up some responsibilities in the house yourself. That seems to work really well in Wallonia. It remembers people in Flanders of maybe 30 years ago. We had lots of kotmadammen, which was a system that maybe makes us think of that as well. So often an older person who was owning a space and then renting out the different rooms in the house. Sometimes the older person would also cook for all the students. That's not definitely the case here, but it can be. And this is interesting because we have lots of houses that are really too big. This is growing in Wallonia, also starting in Brussels, and could be something also for Flanders. It really helps, that is what we also learned from our research in Wallonia, to break loneliness of older people and to facilitate access to housing for students. And the organization says, our dream is a society where generations can help and enrich each other. This is something that I want to conclude this part of the presentation with. Recently, we not only developed the taxonomy, but as a test, we set up a tool for our stakeholder groups, and we developed a course that teachers could use in primary schools in Flanders. Because we think, we know, that pupils who are aged 10, 11 and 12 years old, they get a course, a few hours, about housing in Flanders. Until now, that course really said, oh, it's very important that you are owning a house, and the typical dream is a big house with a big garden surrounding the house. And then we were working on this taxonomy, and somebody said, why not make a tool, not only for your actors, but also for children? And we did that. We made a tool. We tested it in primary schools. And the thing is that it's a fun tool. It's on the website. At the end, a child knows, because we ask some questions, I'm open to sharing or I'm not open to sharing. And then at the end, the child gets a kind of diploma, so that he knows you are open to these types of housing options. What we have learned from our tests is that children, evidently, luckily, talk to their parents. And in that way, a young person talks to an older person already, a future older person, about housing options. And we hope that this thing can trigger future generations to be, again, more open about different housing options. But we have also learned that by doing this and showing it to many people, also housing organizations say, share it with us, I want to do this too. I want to see what I'm open for, because I don't know all these possibilities. So this is for your inspiration to be done later when you have time. Over the years, in this house project, we have been studying lots of housing options, which we listed in the taxonomy, but we have also been talking to many people living in Flanders, in Brussels, in a variety of housing projects that you just saw in the taxonomy. This is just a glimpse of some pictures of people who allowed us to take a picture in front of their housing project. And you see the diversity. We have typical fermettes, typical single-family houses, but we also have social houses. We have people living in apartments, in care housing. We have people living in the midst of cities, but also in rural communities where there is nothing. So we interviewed many people over the years. And we said, why would you consider collaborative housing, or why wouldn't you consider it? Do you think about that? And then people often mentioned feeling of loneliness. If I can do this, maybe it helps to overcome loneliness, because you are the first person I see this week. People also mentioned increased feelings of safety and security. If I would be in a setting where there are other people, I feel more secure, I feel more safe. I'm here in this big house, but I feel unsafe in the evening. So also the presence of somebody in the neighborhood who can help you out. And also the idea of sharing daily routines with others. Every time you will see that I have a quotation at the bottom of each slide, but I will not read it aloud. You can read it yourself. I'm just presenting and sharing some insights that we collected with our people, our respondents. People also said, when I would live in a shared housing project, my dwelling would be smaller, but that's okay. My house is now way too big. I'm spending all my time maintaining it, and I've had enough of it. But at the same time, I want to continue to be the master of my life. I want to be part of the decision-making process. I want to be part of the participatory process. I want to decide what's here and which function is where. And we also feel that many people say, just like us all, we want to stay active in a diversity of ways. And we look forward to increasing our social network. We want that this sentence, the feeling that I'm still useful, that really was mentioned a lot. What does research demonstrate? Again, you see the same kinds of insights here. This is what research says is important, but at the same time, this is also what the people whom we were talking to said. So that was nice for us that we saw that. But we also learned by doing those interviews that we should be aware of concerns. For instance, people said, not in all those sharing housing projects, the house itself can be fine, but the built environment surrounding that place often is not adapted to aging. And maybe if there are lots of cobblestones, it's difficult to walk. Can be challenging for everybody, for instance. Again, people themselves also point to the diversity among older people. There are, later, when you are growing older, the diversity is growing, and people also recognize that and say adapting to a new environment, a new social environment, is not easy. Some people are good at doing that, but not everybody is prone to and open to meet, I don't know how many new people when you are 75. Many collaborative housing projects also stress the informal care. And that's also a thing that many Flemish people also say. It's not because I know my neighbor very good that he's open to to help me wash in my bath. Maybe I will go, I know my neighbor well, maybe I will help him to do some shopping, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to wash his back when he is in the bath or in the bathtub. So that's also a thing that many of our interviewees shared with us. Looking at people who are part of such a housing project, we also learned that there are issues or concerns sometimes regarding to building and managing such a project. For instance, people who live the longest in such housing projects tend to have an idea that they are more important than somebody who's newer in the team. So they have the idea that they have greater control. Often the specific clear policy framework is lacking. And again, co-housing, realizing those projects can take a lot of time because policy is not up to date yet. And we know of a project in my province, for instance, where there is a team of older people already 10 years working on this and the first brick hasn't been laid yet. So it isn't there and it takes a lot of time and effort, and sometimes people just say, I'm going to stop this, I'm not open to it anymore. It also requires a lot of knowledge. We see that among the people who are part of this already. So if it is not supported or initiated by an external organization, it can be very challenging. You need strong leaders. Those were insights from older people whom we interviewed. At the same time, we also interviewed architects. Architects who dared to take the risk already to work on those projects. These were the people whom we talked to. So again, it's qualitative research. It's not 500 architects, it's a sample of people. What they said, we always need to seek a balance between the design for current users. That's also what you saw in the Irish example there. You need to take into account the current users, but also think about the future of the building. It needs to be sustainable, climate-proof, and so on. So adaptability and flexibility in your housing design is really an issue in those designs. At the same time, many of them pointed to the aspect, I need to fight for space. I know that spaces for meeting others is important, to create informal moments of being able to talk to somebody else. But if you work with a commercial organization, there is always the dilemma of the square meters that need to be sold versus designing for such social concerns. At the same time, architects also acknowledge that some people find it very difficult to talk about their future, to recognize that often when you grow older, care is an issue, or care can become or will become more important, or accessibility will be important. Many people with whom the architects were involved with put that aside till now, apparently. So they don't want to talk about that yet. That's something for later. Also, the meaning of collectivity, what can I share? What am I open to share with others, like doing the grocery shopping versus having somebody come in to help you wash yourself? That's an issue that architects also encountered in their design processes. At the same time, they also said, okay, doing such projects takes a lot of time. You need to collaborate with a residence group. It is important, you can learn so much, but it is a lengthy process. And if an architect then starts counting, time is money also for an architectural office, it can be very challenging. It's very intensive also for architectural firms involved in those processes. And you see that here also in the citation. And evidently they also point to policy. They can only do so much, and policy and existing regulations sometimes hinder them in what they can do. Some architects said, well, it's up to your creativity. You can do a lot, but you need to be creative. But then the others would say, creativity takes time, time is money, and I only have so much hours in a day. So you need people, for instance, the policy people who help, who need to be flexible. You need their permission, their go to be flexible. You can do so much, but in the end, somebody needs to give you permission to start a project. So to conclude, there is a real need in our country to translate the growing heterogeneity among older adults in our housing options. We really feel that the policy stimulation that has been given till now, that is very important, but more and more the attention for well-being is also growing. And we think anticipation is a key word in that respect. We are also learned that aging in place and aging well in place isn't always a story of I don't want to. We have learned that people are not sufficiently informed to date, and also that the older people get, the more difficult it becomes to take a step, to take a decision. So there is a lot of work to be done also in terms of information and sensitization, dissemination of knowledge in a very low threshold way to everybody, not only older people, but also people who are currently deciding to maybe buy or rent a house. Good guidance is also important. So what can be done as an older person? I think everybody here knows somebody who is older, has a parent, a good friend, a neighbor. Think timely about later, anticipate, think about what you want and what you don't want. So don't wait to think about those things. Be an active partner. Try to find a lot of information, visit places, talk to people, look at things you like, and also say, I don't like this, so you can help to rationalize your own choices and preferences. What a building sector can do is really keep up to date on innovative projects, think creatively and out of the box, but really have attention for informal meeting, for social interaction, for people who you are designing for. We know that's so, so important. To create places that people can meet others. We have also developed some housing profiles that in a kind of low threshold way link and bring together insights that we have learned about housing well-being in older people that architects can use to be stimulated in the design process of housing options. And we are now experimenting with these cards with students in architecture and students in interior architecture who are making projects, and they are doing that for envisioned persona. They are developing housing scenarios for an envisioned persona with characteristics that we have filtered from the academic knowledge that we have been collecting over the years. To conclude, also local policy has a lot of important steps to take, at least in Flanders, but I think it's the same here. Regarding information and sensibilization, stimulation of these new housing concepts, and evidently also regulations. If these are more flexible or open to flexibility, much more can be done. I will conclude there. Thank you for your attention.